Hi students, this is Mr. Eckert, and we're going to finish out this set of targets with C20, which says that you should be able to describe the steps in anaerobic respiration in terms of their inputs and outputs. So what goes into anaerobic respiration, what comes out. So remember that respiration, whether it's anaerobic or aerobic, starts with the same process. It starts with glycolysis. And again, if you look at that word glycolysis, it kind of gives you a clue as to what's happening. Glucose, which is a large energy molecule, is broken down into two smaller energy molecules known as pyruvates. So remember, that happens in the cytoplasm. It takes some energy in order to break apart the glucose. So it takes 2 ATP, but it generates 4 ATP, so there's a net gain of 2 ATP. Now, once glycolysis has happened, remember, either there's going to be enough oxygen and then aerobic respiration is going to happen, the Krebs cycle and the electron transport chain, or in this case, if oxygen is either not present or not present in enough amount, then anaerobic respiration will come next. A synonym for anaerobic respiration is fermentation. Fermentation and anaerobic respiration still produces some ATP, but not nearly as much as aerobic respiration. Remember, the electron transport chain produced 34, up to 34 ATP molecules. Well, anaerobic respiration is not going to even come close to that amount, but it still produces some. Now, there's two different kinds of fermentation, something called lactic acid fermentation and alcoholic fermentation. In lactic acid fermentation, what goes in is the pyruvates. Remember, the pyruvates came from glucose being split during glycolysis. So the pyruvates go in and they're converted into lactate. A synonym for lactate is lactic acid. So this process, lactic acid fermentation, can actually happen in our muscles. And so think about this. Let's say you're in gym class or PE and the instructor says, all right, we're going to go out, we're going to go on the track and we're going to run a mile today. So you start running. Well, of course, your muscles need energy. So they're going to go through cellular respiration. They're going to need oxygen in order to break the glucose that you've eaten from any food that you had earlier and turn it into ATP, usable energy for your muscles. So think about what happens to your breathing rate when you start exercising. Well, of course, it goes up. And that's because all of your cells need more ATP energy. And to get it, they have to break the glucose down. And in order to break the glucose down, they need oxygen. So what can happen is your cells, you can get to the place where your cells are not getting enough oxygen. And when that happens, then the pyruvates that are made from glycolysis start getting converted into lactate. And lactate, as it builds up in our muscles, causes them to be sore. So those of you that are athletes, you know that when you work out, especially like when you first start conditioning, when you haven't really been active, maybe you're in your off season, then conditioning starts. Well, boy, that first day after conditioning, you're pretty sore. Well, that's because your muscles built up a lot of lactic acid. All right, the other kind of fermentation is called alcoholic fermentation. This does not occur in our muscles. This occurs by organisms shown in this picture here. Those are yeast molecules. So yeast is a type of fungus. It's a unicellular fungus. Now, certain bacteria can also do this. So in alcoholic fermentation, the pyruvate molecules, those are the inputs made from glycolysis, they're converted into two products, carbon dioxide and ethyl alcohol, or ethanol. So this, of course, you can think of a couple of examples of when this happens. If you've ever made bread, of course, you're going to take some flour and you're going to mix yeast in with some sugar and some eggs and maybe a little bit of milk. And you're going to put it, what? In a warm place. The yeast are going to start multiplying and they're going to go through fermentation. They're going to take the sugar, and which is glucose, they're going to break it down into pyruvates, change it into ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide gas. So that's what makes the bread rise. You know, if you put it in a warm place, the bread's going to rise. And that's why. It's because of these bubbles of carbon dioxide gas that are in the dough, making it rise. Now think about what you do with the dough. You put it in an oven and you bake it. You take it out, and boy, there's not much better than hot bread right out of the oven. So when you slice the bread and you look at a slice of bread, what do you see? You see a bunch of little holes in the bread. Well, think about what those holes used to be. Each of those holes was a bubble of carbon dioxide gas in the dough. Now, the ethyl alcohol, before you go eating a whole bunch of bread dough, the ethyl alcohol is very, very small amount. And of course, when you bake it, it has a very low evaporation point, so it evaporates away. So in the bread itself, there's no ethyl alcohol. Now, wine, so think about how wine is made. So you take grapes. Have you ever noticed when you buy grapes from the store, maybe you're eating some green grapes or some, you can see this even easier on purple grapes or red grapes, there's kind of like almost like a powdery substance or a film that's on the skin of the grapes. You can actually rub it off with your finger. If you've ever noticed that, I don't know if you've ever wondered what that was. That is actually natural yeast that grows on the skin of pretty much all fruit. So in fact, fruit flies, they don't eat fruit. They eat the yeast that's growing on the skin of fruit. So now think about what you do with the grapes if you're going to make wine. Well, you take them, of course, and you crush them, either with your feet, your bare feet, or you put them in a wine press and you crush the grapes. That's going to release the juice, which is very high in sugar, but it mixes with those natural yeasts that are growing on the skins. The yeast then changes the sugar that's in the juice into pyruvates and into ethyl alcohol and carbon dioxide gas. So that's why beer has bubbles. Those are bubbles of carbon dioxide gas. So same thing, the yeast, instead of breaking down sugar in grapes, it's just using the sugars in grains that they use in making beer, like hops and the other grains that they use in beer. But in wine, of course, it's changing the sugar in the grape juice into the alcohol and carbon dioxide gas. So sparkling wines would still have that carbon dioxide still in the product itself. So from fermentation, you get 4 ATP produced as opposed to the 34 from aerobic respiration. Now, by the way, I forgot to mention this, but kind of a side note, I was talking a little bit about making wine from grapes. If you want to see kind of a funny video, go to YouTube and type in Grape Lady Falls, and you'll see about a 3 or 4 minute video of a couple of women that are stomping grapes, and something kind of humorous happens during when they were stomping these grapes. So I think that's it for this target, except for here's a overview of that. So up at the top you can see glycolysis. I like this because it shows two pathways. If there's enough oxygen after glycolysis, then those pyruvates that are produced from glycolysis are going to go into the Krebs cycle. You're going to get 2 ATP from the Krebs cycle, and then the electron transport chain is going to occur next. You get 34 ATP. So look here, we get 2 from glycolysis plus the 2 from the Krebs plus 34 from the electron transport chain. That's where we get those 38. However, after glycolysis, the pyruvates, if there's not enough oxygen, then they can go into fermentation or anaerobic respiration, and that's either going to be lactic acid fermentation or ethyl alcohol or alcoholic fermentation. Either way, that produces about 4 ATP, so you get about 6 total ATP through anaerobic respiration. So that's it for that target, and if you have any questions, please make sure you ask.